My name is John Goodwin. My friends call me Gumby. Please call me Gumby. This is a collection of art, video, music, pictures, various events portraying the lives and good times of Nick Menza, Darwin Ballard, and myself, John Gumby Goodwin.
It was in the Weiss Clinic in Munich, Germany, and I didn't speak any German. I was there all by myself, and he came out fine. It's this house where we live now, and where Nick lives too. We have a basement, almost a full basement, and he had his drums down there, and I went to work. He would start practicing, and when it was time to come home from work, I would call him, tell him he was done. He practiced all day long.
Every day around here was always music. Just never stopped. I'm 4 years younger than Nick, so for me, it was great to have all my brother's friends come over.
And then, you know, like Nick would always buy me records to listen to. I didn't know any of these bands, but I mean, he turned me on to Rush and Led Zeppelin and Ozzy. He turned me on to all those bands. And so getting that music from him, you know, as a gift from him, and then he'd be downstairs playing it, and I'd be like, oh my God, I know that song. That's on my record that he got me, you know? And I'd get so excited about it. And then I'd want to go and sit on the steps and listen to you guys play. Most of Nick's friends would let me come down and hang out, and Nick would be like, get out of here, Mom, get her out of here. And he's like, just leave her, she's fine.
I was born in the San Francisco Bay Area, Redwood City, but my family moved to Sacramento when I was pretty young, so I mostly grew up there. What little growing up I did do. My father was a classically trained musician. He played piano, but his thing was conducting and arranging. And so I guess I got the musical gene. But my mom was also an artist. She was a ballerina and studied dance for many years, and then switched over to having babies. So I have 5 siblings, 1 brother and 4 sisters. It was a very musical family. We always played music together. I actually met Darwin when we were pretty young. We were playing baseball in the local organized baseball leagues. So I saw Darwin at school. Hey man, how you doing? All that. I didn't know he was a musician. Until one night I went to a party, and here he is playing bass in a 3-piece, and they're playing Hendrix tunes. And I'm like, cool. And when they took a break, I pulled him aside. I said, hey, I got this drummer. You want to get together and have a jam? And he said, sure. So I had a friend named Mark McCutcheon who lived in my neighborhood, and I knew he played drums pretty well. So Mark and Dar and I hit it off right away. We started writing songs. Darwin, Mark, and I were jamming all the time until Darwin moved to UC Davis to go to school. If we got to school, we would go and we would set up in the lobby of their dormitory and jam all night. It was great fun. The time finally came and we knew we had to move. Darwin even dropped out of school. Right in the planning stages of it, our drummer's girlfriend got pregnant. And the right thing to do was for him to stay here and take care of family business. So that's what we decided. Mark had already introduced us to Kevin Williams, and he had taken over doing all the band management chores for the band At this point, we had made good enough friends with Kevin. He said, hey, if you guys go down there, I want to go. I said, really? That'd be awesome, man. Let's go.
And I had an El Camino, so I had a pickup bed, so I could haul gear around. So I became a roadie, and that's literally how I learned to do what I do today. And I've made a living for over 40 years by going to Gumby's house to watch them practice, and we just became friends, just having fun.
So we got our plan into high gear, and the only problem was we really didn't have a good connection down there. So Kevin and I and Mark were all working at the same place, and this guy came in and he said his brother down in Los Angeles knew a singer who was looking for a band, and he gave me his brother's number. That guy was Bobby Mitchell, lifelong friend of mine and lifelong friend of all of our bands. And I called Bob and we hit it off right away, and we're joking and laughing and telling stories. Next thing I know, he says, well, you know what you do? You guys should just come down here and take a visit. You can hang on my place. Come and see what Los Angeles is all about. Look around.
The hopes and dreams weren't fantasy. Like, we just went down there because we thought, well, why not?
He goes, you know what? I believe in you guys. I've heard your recordings. I see you as people. You can come down here and hang on my pad here in North Hollywood. And I know it's just going to be for a short time. And then you can find your own place when you get jobs and all that kind of stuff. So we put it all in motion. We packed it up and headed down.
Living in LA in 1980, it was pretty awesome, actually. You know, like Gazzari's and the Starwood and the Troubadour and all that shit was for real. There was awesome bands playing. It was a scene. It wasn't like it is now. It was really actually cool. We went to a lot of shows. We hung out with a lot of local bands. It was a really, really good time if you were going to be in LA. It was actually even affordable.
I believe Gumby was only playing guitar for just a couple of years. I mean, for the few years that he played guitar, he was good.
You know, when I first met John and saw him play at such a young age, I seriously was blown away that somebody that young, without any of the life experiences or doing tons of gigs. Back then, I used to tell him all the time, dude, you're by far my favorite guitar player. Like, he had such a grasp on rock. He just had a grasp on it. He just got it. And then he had his Flying V, you know, and he just has such a grasp on music. Like, he just absorbs it. Like, he comes up with licks and hooks. I think he was just a gifted guitar player. You know, I mean, I'd seen a few concerts in my life, but I think to literally see somebody play guitar like that in person, I thought it was awesome. We had some wonderful experiences. We lived in some pretty cool houses in some crazy situations.
We were all living at Cagle Canyon. It's like north of the San Fernando Valley.
We found this house just above Lakeview Terrace, but it was a pretty big house, and we could all live there, and it turns out we could rehearse there. We played a gig at Santa Monica College in their amphitheater, and we're setting up for the gig. I sound checked my guitar, and I was just about ready to leave the stage, and I heard the drums fire up, and all of a sudden I hear this John Bonham thunder coming out of the drum set, and I go, what? And I turned around, and this blonde-haired guy's walking toward me, and I said, who are you? And he goes, I'm Robbie Schaefer. I'm one of the drum roadies. And I said, well, who's playing the drums? And he goes, oh, that's Nick Menza. He's the other roadie. And I said, no, he's not. He's our new drummer. And I just blurted that out, but that's a true story. And Rob looked at me all shocked, like, okay, dude.
It was an Emerald gig, and it was big. That was like the first time that I thought, okay, you know, I'm going in the right direction. And you know, so we got this whole thing, and I'm like trying to keep a beat, and you know, doom, 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 being a fucking, you know, an octopus on the kit. And Nick's like, dude, let me do it. I'm like, go ahead. You know, he just comes down and starts laying these like, you know, sick, heavy, I mean, just fucking hardcore heavy, and Darwin kind of looks up at Gumby and kind of goes, dude, and Darwin didn't say anything. He was like, dude, he had 4 words: love you, brother, load a bowl, let's carve. I can tell you right now that, hearing a sound check at an Emerald gig when Nick was a young kid, this guy's going to be the fucking guy. I mean, we all knew it. I mean, look, growing up with the guy, everybody knew he was a prodigy. I mean, Nick didn't really look like a rocker. He's kind of like, shoulder, big glasses. He just kind of blended in. But as soon as he'd take his glasses off and rip his shirt off, and start playing drums, I mean, everybody else was in second place.
Strange power and energy and charisma that couldn't be denied. I heard that guy play, and that was it. This guy had the sound. So after that, Robbie and Nick and some of the other guys came up, and they saw our very last gig with that instrumental band at one of our house parties up in the canyon. And during one of our breaks, Nick started talking to me, kind of asking me about jamming, and I said, well, okay, that sounds great. How old are you, man? He goes, well, I'm 16 now, but I'm just about to turn 17. And I said, okay, I'm going to be a senior next year. And I go, oh, geez, this guy's still in high school. Well, he started explaining to me that his dad was a professional musician, and he's been around music all of his life, and okay, I started to get it. All right, so yeah, dude, come over jam sometime, and we'll see what's up. And we spent the next 10 years in so many different bands with so many different singers and so many different lineups around that core of me, Darwin, and Nick.
Really, the person that taught Nick how to play drums was Darwin, because he had to follow Darwin's bass lines, and Darwin had to really help him to become cohesive, just like he taught Nick how to play in the framework of a song. Like I said, the first time I saw him play with you guys was a party, and he couldn't even make it all the way through a song. But there were parts of that song where he was like sounding like Neil Peart or something, so you could tell that the guy was going to get it together. And I know he even told me that, Darwin's one of the main reasons. There was just something special about Darwin's ear. I've never met anybody in my life that could literally get up with any musicians in any situation. I don't care. They could be a country band, and Darwin could get up and play with them. And he's one of the only musicians that I've ever met like that. When it came to anything sports or politics, nobody had more knowledge than Darwin. He was like a walking encyclopedia. I mean, the guy was like a computer. He would make lists and write all this stuff down. So his mind was like a trap. And it makes sense that he was such a great musician, because it was the same thing with music. Every note and everything that he ever played or heard stayed in there. He made sure it did.
We tried a few guys out, and then we found this guy named Dave Miles. And this guy was super creative, had a lot of energy. He could sing real loud and real clean. And most of all, he wanted to write songs. Our first gig with Dave Miles was actually a Nick's high school talent show.
And I was just getting into it, and we were jamming. And there was a grand piano that was even with the stage, like a big piano, right? Even with the stage. And I didn't even really think about it. And I'm just like pounding on this piano while I'm singing. And the teacher's just freaking out. So I was like pounding my feet on it and jumping around on this piano. And it was just, so I think I got him in a little bit of trouble. I'm not sure.
Then we started to do some recording, and when we were listening back, we were realizing the styles weren't completely meshing. Although Dave was an awesome singer, we wanted something more raw. But keep in mind, the heavy metal scene wasn't fully formed yet, and the term heavy metal was certainly around. Judas Priest and Black Sabbath were certainly around, but it wasn't a big wave like it became. I first heard of Goodwin music when I saw it in a local music paper ad. And I thought, well, all right, this guy must be pretty cool. He has this rock band and they're doing ads with him. Let me go see what that's about. So I went down there hoping to get a job. But when I went in there, he didn't really have very much guitar stuff. And it was all keyboards, pianos, organs, synthesizers. Anyway, Joe hired me. So the store started getting popular. Remember, this is the 80s, and synthesizers were just blowing up.
It was a converted, former huge department store, but that hadn't been remodeled since its heyday in the 50s or 60s. But one of the things that was interesting about it, we were in the center of the music industry. We were in the center physically and in every other way. And I specialized in keyboards and synthesizers and electronic musical instruments when nobody else was.
And everybody would just start coming and hanging out there. Joe was super cool. He let me bring my dog, Sunshine, down. And every day, Sunshine would get out of the car with me, trot into the store, and she was cool with everybody. Anyway, Goodman Music was a total hangout place. It was a giant department store, and there was 2 staircases, kind of like an old Sears department store, or a Woolworths or something. There was a downstairs and upstairs. Well, nobody went downstairs. It was closed off to the customers. And Joe let my band rehearse in one of the giant rooms down there. It was like a nightclub in there. And we had all kinds of gear. If we need anything, we just went upstairs to the music store and brought it down to the rehearsal room.
It was big. It was like playing in a fucking New York City subway after the apocalypse. Goodman Music was the mecca. Absolute rock, debauchery, prank central, and was also a place of business. But we knew how to balance that, I think.
Well, I spent a lot of time at Goodman Music with Gumby and Nick, and at first I think it was really watching Gumby play in his band, but then Nick joined the band pretty quickly, and that was definitely a den of activity and joy and just some righteous metal going on,
Goodman Music was a pretty popular place, and Joe just gave Gumby the keys to the store and said, you can have the basement.
My store, Goodman Music, was kind of like the band room. Both the employees, the friends, and just people who lived in the neighborhood sort of hung out there. Like in high school, we would all hang out at the band room, and Nick was one of those guys.
We have a music store upstairs with anything that you want, and we have the basement, and we have a studio down there. Like, we have a PA set up, we rehearse down there, we hang out down there, and we have keys so we can get in and do what we want. So that was just absolutely brilliant that we had that opportunity. We were actually fairly responsible. But yeah, good times at Goodman Music, and none of that would have happened had I not met Gumby.
Nick was a great guy, a fantastic drummer, an interesting person, very creative, very intelligent. He would tell me ideas for movies and stories and books and art, all very shockingly, amazingly well thought out, complete, very original, very innovative.
went on a hunt. We needed a new singer, someone with some serious performance skills, almost more than singing skills. Well, bingo. Bobby strikes again. He said, hey, Gumby, I was at a party the other night with this guy, and he says he knows Kelly Rhodes, the brother of Randy Rhodes, and he's looking for a band. He's a singer. We set up a jam with Kelly, and it went pretty good. The three of us could see that Kelly wasn't really in our wheelhouse as far as what we wanted to do stylistically, kind of progressive metal. And Kelly was definitely more of an Aerosmith kind of a guy, you know, real bluesy, and he could do that stuff real good. So we ended up kind of compromising in the middle. That was called Rhodes.
The first Troubadour shows we did were sellouts. There were people around the block. And I can remember talking to Nick before one of the shows. And I just remember his exuberance and how excited he was and how pumped he was. He was great at like building your spirits up. He was just the eternal optimist. Always, always with that big Nick Menza grin.
And about a month later, we played 2 nights in a row, a Thursday and a Friday. And that was kind of unheard of, and we sold out both nights. Various record companies courted us, and the deals weren't very good, and they basically were just demos with them having all the options on us, but yet being able to tie us up. So we were a little frustrated. And then a friend of the Menza family named Freddie Sesher stepped forward and said, hey, I'll produce the record. And even though Freddie didn't really have any experience, he said he had the money. And he said, whatever you guys want to do, I'll take you into the studio and let's just do it. And well, that sounded pretty good to us. I had some friends over at Sound City. They said, well, it's $150 an hour for you guys because you're our friends. And so Freddie came up with some money, gave him a deposit. And it turns out the last band before us was Ronnie James Dio doing Holy Diver. And we were psyched. Man, we loved that record. And I said, hey, where did Vivian Campbell set up his guitar rig? And they showed me, and I said, I want to put my stuff there too, okay? They said, sure, dude. And Nick set up in that big room, those big green pearls he had, and those drums sounded like thunder in that place. It was like a high school auditorium in there. And me and Darwin were flanking him with some baffles in between us, and we tracked that whole album live.
Going there and being in the room where all of the goods were recorded, the drum room, you know, that's all the good drum sounds, and that was a big deal. Sound City, you know, when you're a young kid and you think that you know your band is about on the edge, Sound City was probably what gave everybody the confidence and the motivation to say, okay, we're legit. That was a magic time. I mean, that was a magic place.
I gotta say, Steve Ely, he played the most beautiful acoustic guitar parts on that album, as well as some really solid rhythm. Steve was so dependable all the time, and he was definitely part of Team Metal. And Steve played with Rhodes, but he later went on to play with us in the Green, too. We love Steve.
Rehearsing one night late, I was able to stay over at his house because it was so late. Didn't want to drive home because I lived in Playa del Rey and he was in North Hollywood. And anyways, the next morning I woke up, went downstairs and had some, breakfast. Nick came down and he said he was going to go in the shower. And about a minute or two later, there was like this hellish scream from that part of the house from the shower. And his mom, Rose, got up from the table, went over there. Well, come to find out, he was washing his hair with hair remover or Nair. Yeah, and he was, of course, an hair remover looked like the shampoo bottle because they were sitting next to each other in the shower. And he finally came out, and he was just beside himself.
Tracking at Sound City was a dream come true. The biggest, fattest sounding equipment in the world. Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters actually bought all of the equipment from Sound City and has it at his home studio now. Sound City was inspirational. When you would walk in, there were so many gold and platinum records on the walls from any artist you could think of. And we made a pretty good record, and we were satisfied with it for the time being. And it got released in Europe right away. However, at the same time, Pernod Liquor Company out of France, a big liquor company there, wanted to sponsor us on a tour of Europe. And we thought, okay, if we can get it going in Europe, maybe we can bring that home.
Porte bien, voici un nouveau groupe, Rhodes, qui vient juste de sortir son premier album et déjà se vend en France. Vous allez...
It's sound, it's visuals, it's entertainment. It's a total entertainment package. It's all rock and roll to me.
Freddie managed to screw that up, like he did everything else. He had some investors in Germany that were feeding him money to pay for all the sessions. It turns out this company made parts for the space shuttle, which is one of the reasons we had a fake space shuttle on the cover of our record. Things were coming into view, and we were wondering why Freddie was so hot on that idea.
We're in Germany. The people that were sponsoring us, they kept reminding us, no drugs. Don't do any drugs over there. Don't get any drugs. Don't look for any drugs. And don't do any drugs.
A lot of bands would have been discouraged and given up at that point. But I knew a booking agent in New York, and I started bugging him to the point of he finally succumbed and said, okay, man, I'll give you guys some dates. And what this guy gave us was perfect. All the West Coast dates opening for Foghat right before Christmas. So the first night, we traveled down to San Diego to this club called the Bacchanal. We get up there, we do our set, and we're way too loud. Louder than usual. We're just completely excited, and we can't believe what's happening, and we're just like cranking. So we get off the stage and we walk backstage, and we're in our dressing room, and we're kind of catching our breath and having a drink and just chilling and saying, that was awesome. Yeah, that was great. And all of a sudden the door bursts open, and it's Foghat's road manager, this old English craggly guy. And he comes in and he kind of shuts the door brisk behind him. He says, what was that? That was the most disrespectful sale I've ever seen for an opening band for us. And we're like, uh-oh. And our heads all went down, and we're like, oh, what did we do? He says, you're playing too fucking loud. Do that again, you'll be going home soon. We were shocked. We thought, oh my God, we've blown it. That was our chance, and we've blown it. And then the guy had a heart, and he saw that we were completely sorry for our behavior. And he said, listen, boys, you're new. Just turn it down tomorrow night a bit, wouldn't you?
You know, bear in mind that like everybody in this band and crew were like super into Foghat. I mean, Foghat Live, wow, that was a huge live record. But the minute that they heard us, oh boy, we just put the wrong fish on the boat.
And one of the last gigs was in San Francisco. So it was gig time. And we were ready to hit the stage, and we didn't want to waste 1 minute of our set. But the road manager for Foghat came up again, and he says, look, you guys, we've got to hang you back just for 1 minute. They had a little problem at the door, and a bunch more people are coming in. That's better for you. Lose one song, and you'll be glad you did. So we finally did hit the stage, about 5 or 10 minutes late. But the guy was right. The place was packed. We fired up, and we could do no wrong. It was like the sound was great. The people responded to everything. It was compact and tight, and the place went nuts. If we weren't the opening act, we could have done an encore easy, but that wasn't going to happen. And everybody's watching Foghat when they finally came out. That place was roaring. So backstage, all the bands were on cloud nine, and we wanted to party. And all these people had followed us back to our rooms. So there was 3 rooms. And the first room had all the beer in it for some reason. And Nick takes a bedspread, he puts it on the floor, and he starts going to the ice machine. And Nick comes back with all these bags of ice he can barely hold, and he dumps them on the bedspread on the floor. And I go, dude, what are you doing? Well, the bags had broken open and the ice was everywhere. So he just takes the corners of the bedspread and he gets it all into the middle. And he starts laying beers on the ice. And so there's, like 20 or 30 beers icing up on the floor. Anyway, people are grabbing them just as fast as you can put them down anyway. And people are milling in and out of there. A lot of smoking pot, a lot of strange looking people. It was San Francisco. We had wrecked those rooms. There was a pond in the middle of the first room where the ice had melted. And we took the bedspread and kind of wadded it up and threw that into the bathtub, thinking, yeah, we got it. No, we didn't. It was really, really a lot of water. And we packed up our stuff and headed out of there. The record wasn't going to be properly promoted and distributed, and that left us dead in the water. So finally, Rhodes was disbanded, and we started looking at each other, what do you want to do? Well, me and Nick and Dar knew we wanted to go on, and we needed to find a singer that could play the style of music we wanted. And we found this guy named Gary McIntyre, and we call him Gary Mac. So we wrote a bunch of new songs, and we call ourselves The Green.
Back in those days, that was the band that they were kind of meant to play. I mean, that's where, like, at that time, they were so focused and so in tune. They kind of read each other's minds. It was a really in sync thing, and it was really awesome, And everybody paid attention. I mean, guys saw these guys and said, "Okay, these guys are good."
The guy was constantly in motion. Sometimes he would jump up and bash a cymbal. Sometimes he'd just go wild around the kit. And I started noticing every time he did a drum solo, the place went nuts. So I'm thinking, you know what? Why didn't you just start the set with a drum solo? And at first he thought, you're crazy, man. What are you talking about? But it started to make sense because think about it. You come out on stage, yeah, you did a sound check, but no one has a mix on the first song. This way, Nick comes out, the sound engineer can dial in the drums as he's doing that. Boom.
Went down to the Roxy to go see another band. I'm hanging out, you know, and I'm watching this next band, like the crew come in and they're setting it up. And these guys bring like this, what looked like a door, right? They bring this door in, they carry it in and they set it down like in front of the stage, you know, offset. And I'm like looking down like, what is that? You know, so I couldn't really get up front. It's pretty packed. I walk around to the side, I'm looking at it, I'm like going, it's all effects, right? It's all the stomp boxes, you know, it's the 80s, right? So I'm like, wow, who does that? That's crazy. Next thing you know, the lights go down and the show starts and this guy starts with a drum solo. And I'm like, who starts with a drum solo? About halfway through that drum solo, I'm like, wow, he's pretty good. I mean, he's really good. Well, it ended up being Nick. And I don't know. It was kind of weird and kind of oddball and kind of quirky at the time, but, you know, it worked. You know, I never forgot it. Let's put it that way.
Troublemaker isn't the right word. Instigator is the right word. He could go into a group of people, say a few words, and everybody would be agitated, and he would slip backwards and watch and smile. Not maliciously, just a people study. Like a comedian.
He liked to kind of like get the gears going and then kind of like sort of like get out of the picture and like watch it go berserk. Yeah, that happened a lot. That happened all the time.
Dar and I come strolling in, and Darwin was carrying a 6-pack of beer for us. And we come walking in, and Nick's in the kitchen. He's like, oh, come in, guys. You know, we come in. Darwin comes in and trips and drops the 6-pack of beer right in the middle of Nick's kitchen. And the 6-pack hits the floor, explodes, all the bottles break, and beer just shoots everywhere. And without even dropping a second, Nick turns and goes, oh, just set that anywhere. And that is just so typical of Nick, that he had such a great sense of humor. And as Gumby pointed out when I told him that story one time, he lived for moments like that when he could come up with one of his one-liners or say something funny because he had a great sense of humor.
One time we're driving down Sunset Boulevard and we pull out of this one club, and as we're pulling out, the cops pull us over and the cop comes up to the window and goes, "You guys got any drugs, alcohol, or guns?" And Menza looks through the window and goes, "What do you need?" And boom, it was like we were on the ground, hands behind our backs. It was hilarious.
Well, we got this gig opening for Jane's Addiction, and they were blowing up, and it was basically an album release party for them at the Whiskey.
That night was a big deal. Everybody just fucking played really, really deep. They played it deep. They didn't play for the show. They played for them, you know. And everybody who actually got it, and there was like 3/4 of the people there that were looking at them, just like, "Hey, dude, I don't know what these guys are doing, but I want to fucking take this straight. That's where I want to go. I'm heading where they're going," you know.
We had a couple of songs to go, and the stage manager motions to me to come over to the side of the stage. He says, "Hey, one more." And I said, No, man, we have 2 more. And he goes, "You have 1 more." I go, "Oh, okay." So I went over to Nick and Dar and Gary, and I said, "Hey, it's time to do that Zeppelin medley, right?" And they all chuckled. They knew what I was talking about. It's 3 long Zeppelin songs.
They cut our set, you know, and I think John looked at, you know, Dar and Nick and said, "Hey, dude, let's do that Zeppelin medley."
And if I say to you tomorrow, all the fun yes, to the castle I will take you. Where was to be the same will be.
everybody kind of dispersed. We did our thing. Crew was doing, we're all doing our thing. Gary stumbles outside.
It was disheartening to be treated that way, but we had seen that before. But Gary apparently hadn't, and he got really upset. And we didn't find out till later. He walked off that stage right out the front door.
And of course, who does he run into? But, Lemmy Kuhlmeister himself. You guys, right? Fucking what?
Lemmy could see he was all upset. He goes, "What's wrong?" And Gary starts going into a diatribe how they treated us so badly. They cut our set short and this and that and the other thing. And Lemmy just looks at him and laughing and goes,
"If that's your problem, pussy, then you got a lot to worry about, okay? This is the real life. This isn't make-believe."
"Hey, boy, it gets way worse than that. You better go home and not come back." Well, that's exactly what Gary did. He went home and he never came back. We literally never saw him again or talked to him again. That was it. He disappeared. So that was the end of the Green. And Nick and I had just basically spun our gears. Nick said, "I'm going to go write some songs." So Nick comes up with a few riffs. Some of them are kind of like Anthrax, kind of speed metal. Some of them are really heavy and doom-like. And some of them are like a horror movie. He was into horror movies. So I said, "Wow, those are pretty good, man. And who's going to sing them?" And he goes, "Oh, I am." I go, "Well, yeah, okay." And so he goes away for another couple of weeks, and he comes back and he's talking to me. He goes, "We always wrote songs and everything, and I was just trying to do something on my own, but I can't really play guitar good enough, and it'd be cool if you'd help me finish these songs." And I said, "No problem, dude. They're cool. I would love to work on them." So Von Skeletor is the name we came up with for that project. It was kind of irreverent and almost punk rock and thrashy, and it was just for fun. It wasn't all that serious like the other bands we had done. Well, we got our friend Cam to play drums and our longtime friend Juan to play bass, and we put together a recording and everybody loved it.
Then we went over to Silver Cloud recording, Joe Floyd. It was kind of tough. I wasn't used to playing quite that aggressively up to that point. And, I had Nick egging me on and John egging me on, and the performance, I think, turned out really good.
So our good friend and sound man, Neil Schaefer, who was like a mentor to us, he was just our friend and he saw our potential and he wanted to help us. He said, "Hey, do you guys want to audition for some bigger bands?" And so me and Nick said, "Sure." And so right away, Neil got me an audition with Metal Church. And I learned their songs and I went up to Seattle and I jammed with them, actually Aberdeen. Turns out it was like in a barn behind their grandma's house. Anyway, the audition went pretty well, and I played the songs real well, and they thought, "Hey, you're a contender," and they told me so. A guy named John Marshall eventually got the gig. John Marshall had played guitar for Hetfield when Hetfield burned his arm in a stage accident. So he had quite a bit more cachet than me. That went well for him, that's fine. But it was fun to go up and jam with them, and I know I played well, and they did too. And then Nick calls me and he goes, hey, dude, Neil got me an audition with Slayer. He said, the only thing is, though, the audition's in a couple of days and I got to know the whole Rain of Blood album. I go, dude, how are you going to do that? He goes, I know I can do it.
I get a call. Guess what? Dave Lombardo's got an issue. He's MIA. So they called him in to do this audition. So Nick has to learn the entire record in Rain and Blood in 24 hours. Okay, so he's just jamming. He's at my house. We're not bothering the dude. He gets a call and he's like, hey, dude. He goes, don't worry. He goes, we're going to do it on Tuesday. Nick's like, Jesus Christ, you're fucking killing me. So we went to Laverne, California, across the street from the Farmer John packing plant. I mean, I'm telling you what.
Delicious hot nuggies, one after the other.
And it smelled like I can see why people go vegan. I'd say 3/4 away through the first track, they looked at me and was like, hey, yo, hey, shh, hey, slow down. Take a breath. Slow down. He did the entire set, and they're like they're looking around like, all right, dude, that's the guy. Okay. Well, I walk out to go have a cigarette. Who do I see but Dave Lombardo going, being like, hey, man, who are you? And he's like, I'm the drummer in the band. I'm like, well, not today, you're not. Sorry, pal.
So it turns out Slayer just used Nick to get their old drummer, Dave Lombardo, back. They wanted to prove to him that he was replaceable, and I guess they did, because he came back. Nick was a little burnt, and he felt used by those guys, and, he wasn't up for a lot more of that kind of auditioning. However, Neil called us and he said, hey, Megadeth might need a guitar player and a drummer. Are you guys interested? We said, sure. So Neil invited us down, and he said, Chris and Gar are stumbling, and Dave thinks they might not make it, and we want to have somebody in the wings. So come down, I want you to meet the guys. So we go down to Long Beach where they're playing on the Peace Cells tour, and Neil's mixing their sound. And we go on to the bus before the show, and Chris Poland comes on, and we meet him. Hey, man, how you doing? Great album, man. You played great on that. So great. And he left, and we never did meet either Dave. Well, we went out and watched the show, and Nick and I walked away going, this is weird. Dave's snarly voice guy is funny and everything, but that's not what's really driving this band. Gar and Chris are what's driving this band. They were amazing. Gar basically invented speed metal drumming. He came from a fusion background, so he knew how to do the double bass thing. And then he turned it up a notch or two and pounded a little bit harder. And next thing you know, Megadeth was born, man. I'm telling you, the guy was a monster. And he doesn't get credit. Now, Chris Poland, there's another guy. One of the most underrated guitarists of all time. This guy is an amazing talent. For Dave Mustaine to want him out of his band is just nuts. Doesn't make any sense at all. Although in retrospect, it was all part of the plan. In fact, Peace Cells was going to be the first record that made them some money. Dave got a little taste of that and goes, really have to give that much to those guys? He goes, nah. First two victims of Dave Mustaine fell. Gar and Chris were gone. For who? Jeff Young and Gar's roadie, Chuck Wheeler. Well, turns out Chuck had already auditioned because Gar was too high one night, fell off the stool, and Chuck finished the set for him. Okay, good job, Chuck. You got the gig. Jeff is a different story. Turns out Jeff Young was teaching Jay Reynolds from a band called Malice how to play the songs. And Dave found out. And he said, well, I'll just hire Jeff. He already knows the songs. Plus, I found out later when I read the Rest in Peace book that Dave said Jay was the guy he bought heroin from, and he didn't want to mess that up either. Ironically, Jay went on to play with Metal Church later. It's a small world. So Neil called and said Jeff and Chuck were already on rocky ground, and could we and Nick come out on the road with them? Well, the first thing Neil wanted me to do was rebuild the complete backline for the band and try to design some amp rigs that were roadworthy. So I look at their gear and it's about ready to catch on fire just from looking at it. And I said, yeah, I can do this. I have an idea.
Gumby built the rigs for us per, I think, our sound man, Neil Schaefer, who Gumby and Nick knew. I think brought Gumby in initially to build the guitar rigs. And then he was hired on as a tech to go on the road. And I think Gumby, because he's a player and he liked a lot of the same stuff that we did, a lot of the same stuff that Dave, like Michael Schenker and Jimmy Page. And, he sort of he was inside the heart and mind of a guitar player, and I think that's what made him very effective on our crew when he worked for us. I think in a lot of ways because he could hang with us, but was not a druggie and, was not a prude. I think he, in a lot of ways, he sort of defined the lines on the road. If it's like, if you went past Gumby, you were in the ditch, right? So I think Gumby in a lot of ways was as long as you're kind of within the confines of Gumbyism, like he wasn't looking at you like, dude, what are you doing over there? Like, Junior, pull it together.
Well, after a few rehearsals, Nick and I were invited to go on the road, pretty much as planned, and we headed out. And funny enough, Kevin Williams gets hired as well. So Team Metal was on the move now behind Megadeth. And of course, soon after, we got Rob Schaefer on the team as well. At first, I was assigned to do Jeff's side of the stage and help him with his guitars and such. Well, he was really, really fussy. He did his own guitars, and he didn't want me to touch them. Okay. And then we did a few gigs, and everything was okay. One night, even though I'm behind the amps, I hear something's going wrong out front. Part of Jeff's sound isn't there. And I ran out there, and I put my head down by the speaker to listen. Well, I guess I wasn't fast enough because Jeff came up behind me, put his foot on my back, and kicked me over. Now keep in mind, there's thousands of people watching. And he screams at me, "It's the mic, motherfucker, it's the mic." Well, I didn't really care what it was, did I? I stood up, flipped him off, and walked off stage. And I was just heading back when one of the managers grabbed me and said, "It's cool, dude, come with me." Well, they got me backstage and they said, "It's not your fault, we saw what happened." Well, Dave found out what happened. I was switched, and now I was going to work with Dave Mustaine. And in fact, they asked me, "Hey, can you do Dave Ellison's rig too? All the bass guitars?" And I said, "Sure." So they ended up paying me more to do both of them, and they really liked it because I was really conscientious and I had their stuff dialed. And we went on for years like that. And every time we ended a gig, Dave would take his white flying V that he played anarchy with, and he'd throw it to me. And I'd catch it with one hand. Well, it got crazy. It got further and further, and he'd go further and further away and make it sail. And I never missed it. Before they finally went into rehab, the boys tried one more time to work on some songwriting. We booked the guys into Holly Gully, a rehearsal studio over in Glendale. And the place was rat infested, really horrible. There was a bucket in the middle of the room to catch the rain coming in. But that's where a lot of Rust in Peace was written. Nick Menza and I were in there helping him with gear a little bit. And Nick was really helpful to Chuck. He set up his drum pedals to get the maximum speed Chuck needed to play those songs. I know Chuck was really grateful. Those guys were good friends. Everything was cool. Chuck was a good guy. Really good drummer. Finally, management said, "Hey man, that's it." And the guys were so fried, it was time. They had to go to rehab.
I did get David Ellison checked in, but he split after a few days, so I had to go find him and remind him of the awesome opportunity he'd be squandering if he didn't get it together.
Gumby came to my house and he said, "Hey, man," he goes, "Dude, like getting help is a sign of strength, not weakness. And you're doing what millions of us musicians would love to be doing. You got it in the palm of your hands and you're just pissing it away. Now get in the car. We're going back to rehab." And he drove me back to rehab because he cared about me. He was my friend and he cared about me. Not from a job, not from, hey, and that's a pretty ballsy thing, because when you step in front of addiction like that, you're easily the first one to be shot in the head and thrown out the door, right? Because, hey, don't tell me what to do. I'm your boss. Screw you. So that was very ballsy and very bold of him to do that, and to do it because he knew ultimately my life was on the line. So I will never, ever forget that from Gumby. And for that, he is one of a small handful of people who really, were not my enablers. They just said, "Hey, you need to do the right thing," and he got in front of it. So I was even in rehab when I was introducing him as my friend, and I said, "Hey, he's the guitar tech, and he might even become the next guitar player at Megadeth." That position was unknown. Maybe I even said he was the next guitar player at Megadeth. I certainly gave him the nod that, hey, he's on the inside here. He's not just some lackey. He's one of the inner circle. Gumby to me is just, he's definitely a man of character. Again, I think the fact that he came over to my house and, called me out and stood in front of my addiction and said, "Hey, get in my car. We're going back to rehab." Someone who's willing to walk in front of those bullets and take the heat. And I don't think anything more needs to be said. I mean, to me, that's helping save a man's life.
Dave Mustaine, however, was much more problematic. I tried several times to get him checked in. The first time I got him down there, he was all the way up the stairs and almost through the front door, and he ran back, jumped in the car, and said, "Take me home."
So after many tries, Mustaine finally emerges, and him and Ellison call up Nick, and they say, "Hey, you want to come over here and jam some of the songs?" Because they remembered how good he was. They get this weird call, and Nick goes, "Hey, they're going to start auditioning guitar players, and they want you to come down." I said, "I got to audition? Dude, I've jammed those songs with those guys so many times. Really?" They said, "Yeah, you got to come because they're videotaping everybody and they want management to see it." I said, "Okay." So I said, "One thing though, I want to go last." He said, "Okay." So I go in there, and there's Dave, his manager, Ron Lafitte, and David Ellison's over there warming up on his bass. And Nick's sitting behind the drums. Well, Nick and I couldn't help it. We're grinning. We worked hard to get to this point right there. That's where we wanted to be. So Dave goes, "Hey, Gumby, you know the songs?" And he chuckled because he knew I knew the songs. So he says, "Wake Up Dead." So I look at Nick, and it was almost like the bell had rung and he was entering the ring. He blasted into that drum fill, and we were on. And Dave looked over and nodded, "Right on, Gumby." I did my solos, has that big rhythm section ending, and we nailed it. Big finish, boom. We blazed through a bunch of them, Devil's Island, all the classics, and it went really well. I couldn't have been happier. I knew the songs. I've been on the road with them. I heard those songs every night. I watched how they play them. I knew the song. So a little time passed, and I was getting like a little vibe, like, tell me yes or no or maybe. Nothing.
And then Nick called and he said, "Hey, we got together and we watched the videotape of everybody auditioning for the band. And when the tape was over, since you went last," Dave turned to us and in a snarky voice he said, "It would have to be Gumby."
And I do remember something about Dave's comment, kind of like, God, it would have to be Gumby, because we liked Gumby. Gumby and I, after the tour, he and I did a lot of playing. There's a moment there where, Jeff Young was now out of the lineup in early 1989. The future of, the second guitar position was open. Gumby and I got along well as friends. We got along well musically. We liked playing together. And the fact that Nick and Gumby had played together didn't guarantee either one of them the position. But, sometimes you don't just come as a team. Well, look, I'll give you a perfect example. We called Dimebag Darrell and his name from Pantera. We were looking specifically at him. And he said, well, thank you for, I love Megadeth. Thank you for the call. But with me comes my brother. And so we didn't get Dime because we didn't need a drummer. And of course, Vinny's fantastic. So, you know, it isn't just Gumby and Nick that it happened to. It happened to Dime and Vinny, right? Who then went on, of course, to pretty much change the world with their work in Pantera. So obviously there's a reason it didn't work.
Nick calls me and he goes, hey Gumby, just so you know, Dave's auditioning like semi-famous guitar players. They think they want to get a big name in there. I said, oh, okay. And I said, well, who have you tried? And they go, well, they asked Dimebag, but he said no. And now there's a guy named Marty Friedman here. Well, I knew who Marty was. He's awesome. He played with Jason Becker in a band called Cacophony.
You know, that was a great band, actually. The whole band was just a really good band. Marty and Dave and David Addison and Nick, just a fucking great band. I mean, they were just, when they started playing, it was just like, it would just give you goosebumps, you know. And I have no idea why he didn't keep it going, but I guess that's, you know, that's all Dave's story. But, you know, I'll tell you, that band was fucking kicking ass, man. That was like one of the best bands I ever fucking saw.
And I saw Nick in Megadeth, man. It's like every time he stole the show, man. He was doing these big, long Neil Peart style drum rolls and standing up while he was doing them. And he was rad. He was a kill showman.
It's interesting, when they finally had a meeting and they were going to have a reunion, it was just a game that Mustaine played. He wanted to get those two back in a room with him and basically tell them, yeah, I could put this back together, but I'm going to make you so miserable, you're not even going to want to do it. And that's what he did.
I actually did talk to Dave in 2014 when they were trying to do this reunion, and he did ask me to do it. And basically, it was all Dave's baby, and he didn't want to, you know, share anything. And it just seemed like that was just another one of these things where Dave just wanted three guys, you know, to play all the stuff and make the money, and then he could get rid of the three guys later on and, you know, just move on. You know what Nick was like. I mean, he just like he pushed it, he'd roll the lever, but he'd roll it, you know, push it further than it's supposed to go. So, you know, and it was the same with his playing, I think, in a lot of ways. So he'd just try and push it further all the time. Dave's the sort of guy you really can't do that to, you know, because he's just going to try and he's just going to come back at you even more, you know, because he always wants to win. So, you know, he's never going to leave you with the last word or, you know, anything like that. It is what it is. There isn't anybody on the planet that dislikes Nick, except maybe Dave Mustaine. But he's the only guy in the world. But everybody else loves Nick because he's such a great character and such a likable guy. And he was really kind, and he was courteous, and he was good to the fans, and he would talk with anybody. And I'm not going to go into, you know, slagging off Dave because he doesn't need any help with that. Dave is who he is, and he doesn't need me to pass any comment on him. I try not to get into any kind of shouting matches, you know.
Nick turned out to be a real special character. Yeah, he's a great drummer, and that's what people know him for, but the guy has a sense of artistic perspective that's very rare. He sees the picture where no one else does. He says, can you see it? And then slowly people do. He worked in all kinds of medium. Wood, paint, 3D sculptures, you name it. The guy created visual art that was amazing. Well, Nick was not going to be stopped with just drums anyway. He started playing guitar, but right away he started tuning guitars to his own tuning. He just heard something in his head, started clinking around on it. Oh yeah, okay, that's what I want. You pick one up and you go, what the? And it was even almost impossible to get into any normal tuning. They were so far away from regular tuning. And I'd end up just saying, okay, just roll it. And I just pick up one of his guitars and that was half the fun. Well, let's see what this one does. If you listen to his solo record, it's very unusual, that music.
He got so into it because he wanted to make his own music. He had a whole bunch of guitars lying around the house, and they were all in just bizarro bananas tunings. It's just like not one of them was in standard tuning.
Finally, things normalized, and Nick was long past Megadeth. We did a series of albums that we called Freaktricity, because it was instrumental music and it was all over the place. We just did whatever we wanted. The last Freaktricity album, Freaktricity 5, was one that he really got into it. Well, the day that the CDs were done at the President site, I went to go pick them up. And I thought, well, I'll drop some by Nick's house. So I go over there and I knock on the door, and I got a stack of them in my hand. He opens the door and he says, yo, Gumby, come in, and he gives me a big hug. He goes, what do you got? And I show him, and he puts it on, and he goes, oh, man, I'm so glad you finished this, man. Those sessions were so fun. I had such a good time. And we're talking about this, and we're talking about that, and we had a great conversation going. He goes, hey, man, I got to get ready. Chris Poland's coming over to pick me up. We're going to have an Omer rehearsal.
I never got to know him until after we got together later, and I'd be over there all night long, every night. And my wife was like, are you going to go over to his house again tonight? I was like, I have to. And that's how tight I got with Nick so fast. And we were like, we became best friends, and everybody loved Nick. I don't even know who didn't love Nick. He was just that guy, you know. He would give you all his money he had on and a shirt off his back if you asked him. And I miss him.
And I said to him, I'm so glad you guys are playing together. That's a perfect fit for you. You were born to be in that band. He goes, hey, dude, why don't you come and jam with us? And I said, nah, I actually have to drive up to Northern California tonight, so I better get going. I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I would have done a jam with him. 4 days later, Dave Miles called me in the middle of the night. I said, Dave, what's up? He goes, dude, I can't believe it. Nick's gone. I said, what? He said, Nick was playing his drums at the Baked Potato and he had a heart attack. He's gone. I couldn't believe it. It was a shock. And he was like, Gumby, are you there? And I go, yeah, I'm here, man. I better call you back later, okay? He goes, yeah, I understand. So it was true. And if that wasn't bad enough, literally getting a memorial show together to honor Nick. And I had been talking to Darwin, going over some songs we're going to play. And then I get another call. Darwin's passed away. How could that be? And I got to tell you, it's harsh. That's just the way it is. What I can say to those two, save me a good seat.